follow the traditions and customs of our family, as in our father, like Shema B'ni Musa Avicha.
Yeah.
And we follow our father, and I wanted to know where does that start, and where exactly does it end, like with regard to halacha, with regard to like hashkafa, and when if I find out something else which is different to my parents and I think it sounds more logical, am I allowed to change that? And traditions, like that.
Yeah, well, those are very good questions. As a general rule, the basis for following the father is that a person's status in the Jewish community depended on his father. So if your father was a Kohen, you were a Kohen. If your father was a Levi, you were a Levi. Your mother's status did not define your position in the Jewish community. And in the book of any tribe, by the way, we don't have those tribes today, but Reuven, Shimon, it was all father-based. And then the Torah says in Deuteronomy, Sha'al avicha v'yagetcha. You will ask your father and he will tell you. And the teaching of Torah was primarily done by a father. So in terms of halachic practices, we generally follow the father. But there are a number of points you need to keep in mind. That is, the mother has an absolutely indispensable role, right? The verse that you quoted in Proverbs, one learns chastisement from the father, Musar, and there's Torah from the mother. Now, what do we mean by Torah? So Torah refers really to what you might call a person's emotional connection to Judaism. That the father was traditionally seen to be the repository of information and knowledge, but the mother created the atmosphere of the home, the warmth, the feeling, the emotional connection. And that was essential because Judaism is not only about knowing things and even only about doing things, it's about feeling things. And often it was the mother that created that, in an ideal world, created that atmosphere. That's one point. A second point to keep in mind is that in many, many homes, it may very well be possible that the mother is more halachically observant and knowledgeable than the father, in which case she would be the one whose lead you would follow simply because she may know more. A third thing, though, you would ask me about changing customs and the like. So this is a bit tricky. If one does not come from a religious family, they actually have a certain freedom of choosing which path they want to follow. In other words, you don't have to follow your father's father or your father's 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 father. You could decide, I'm a Baal Tshuva, and I am trying to find out what part of Judaism works best for me. So you would be permitted to go with your mother's minhagim or anyone else's minhagim. Now, if you come from a religious home, and therefore as a result, you did have the minhagim of your father, if you felt a need to change, there may be some basis to do so, but you would have to treat it as a vow that needs to be annulled, and therefore you'd have to go in front of a Beit Din of 3 rabbis, and you'd have to make a formal declaration as to why you want to change. But there can be a basis for it when necessary. So these rules are not as rigid and definite as you might think. There is room for changing. The one thing we don't like is we don't like Chinese menu Judaism, meaning to say, I like this custom of my father and this custom of my mother, and I like Ashkenazim doing this and Sephardim doing this, and then you create an amalgamation in which you don't belong to a well-defined community. That's not proper because that's kind of shopping around. But if one wants to consistently follow a shita, there will usually be some mechanism in halacha that will allow you to consistently even reaffiliate with a community in a certain way. Okay? So that's kind of the general overview.
Does it extend to hashkafa in any way?
Well, hashkafa in some ways is less rigid than even halacha, because hashkafa is a person's value system, their general orientation. Now, in many ways, we of course get that from our parents, but we do have to exercise our judgment as to what is the hashkafa that is most meaningful to me. And I definitely would not say you're bound to follow the hashkafa of your father. I think you need to pay it very careful attention and integrate it, but you then make your own decision. I mean, in hashkafa, you basically, with your teachers and your rebbes and your Torah learning, you basically make your own decision in hashkafa. Nobody imposes a hashkafa on you. Yeah.